This is Mother Murderer Podcaster, a show about the most outrageous and the best made-for-TV movies of the 80s and 90s.
Hi, I'm Katie Madonna-Lee, a filmmaker.
And I'm Lewis Jordan. I'm a writer. And we are just two little girls from Little Rock. Because this week, we are covering Blonde, not Andrew Dominik's NC-17 Netflix movie that just came out last month, but actually the other film of Blonde that was made from Joyce Carol Oates' fictional novel about Marilyn Monroe. It's the 2001 CBS made-for-TV miniseries, Blonde, which was directed by Joyce Chopra, written by Joyce Ellison, which I love that the movie was made entirely by Joyce's, and starring an all-star cast. Poppy Montgomery, well, actually that was her first movie, but then the rest, Ann Margret, Kirstie Alley, Patrick Dempsey, Wallace Shawn, Griffin Dunne, and Patricia Richardson. And so these two films, the one that just came out on Netflix and this one from 2001, they're based on the same book. They contain a lot of the same scenes, the same dialogue, even some of the same shots, but tonally they are completely different. And I'm so glad that I have, to get some perspective on it, I have Marilyn Monroe right here with me to tell us how things were. If for the people who are on the audio podcast, Katie has all done up like Marilyn, with Marilyn makeup, Marilyn hair in the iconic like black turtleneck look. You'll have to see her on our YouTube. She looks fantastic.
Thank you.
But anyway,
2.5 hours.
This is why.
I'd like everyone to know, Lewis made a fantastic observation. When I texted him, I said, it took me 2.5 hours to do this. And you said...
I said, oh, no wonder she was late to everything.
Yes. This is really big project. I don't think people have any idea. I certainly didn't. I took it for granted. I thought it was just a simple red lip.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah.
There's a lot of shape.
It's all illusion. One thing I think we're going to cover in this is how much artifice there was in Marilyn, and that, it's all of this makeup. It's the way that she speaks. It's the way that she moves. No one speaks like that naturally.
She certainly didn't have a thick Chicagoland accent with touches of Minnesota in it like I do. Anyway.
No, well, she spoke like this all of the time and over enunciated all of her words, at least early on. So there's a lot of ground to cover because we've got both of these movies, although we're mostly focusing on the TV movie because that's what we do. So I'm going to give a quick plot summary, as quick as I can for a miniseries. And then we're going to look at some of the people who were involved in making the movie and talk about what we liked and what we didn't like. And then we'll compare the 2001 Blonde with the 2022 Blonde and, decide which one we like better. So it's the Battle of the Blondes. You ready to get into it?
Yes.
Okay. And hello, Lola. And I also wanted to give a little disclaimer before I get into the plot summary, because Blonde might seem like it's a biography of Marilyn Monroe, but actually it's historical fiction. Joyce Carol Oates' Marilyn is a fictional character, and she does a lot of things that there's no evidence that Marilyn actually did. but the story follows the basic outlines of Marilyn's life and her movies and her marriages. So unless you're a Marilyn scholar, it's hard to tell where the reality ends and where the fiction begins. Even for me, I'm a Marilyn fan, and I had to go back and go, did that happen? Did this? Oh wait. And Oates describes the 800-page book, which was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize, as her Moby Dick, with Marilyn being the great white whale, being, this grand symbol. So Oates wasn't just trying to tell Marilyn's life story. She was using the symbol of Marilyn to communicate something about Hollywood and celebrity and being a woman in the 20th century. So we shouldn't take Blonde in any of its forms, book, TV movie, or Netflix movie, at face value, because it's an allegory and not a biography. So, that said, I'm going to dive into the summary.
Right on.
So, Joyce Chopra's Blonde opens with an image of Marilyn passed out on a beach, looking like a shipwreck survivor. We flash back to Marilyn's childhood in Los Angeles when she was Norma Jean Baker. Norma Jean lives with her grandmother, who's played by Ann Margret, whom she adores, but when her grandmother dies of a heart attack, Norma Jean has to live with her mentally ill mother Gladys, played by Home Improvement's Patricia Richardson. And Gladys shows Norma Jean a picture of a man with a mustache and tells her that that man is her father, and he's a big wheel in Hollywood, and he's going to come back someday to claim her. And that becomes very important to Norma Jean. But Gladys becomes more unbalanced and violent until finally she has a psychotic break and sets their apartment on fire. And she's committed, and Norma Jean runs to her neighbor for safety, but he can't keep her, and so he takes her to an orphanage. And at the orphanage, Norma Jean kind of learns how to perform for attention and how to mold herself into what people want her to be in an effort to get adopted. So she's placed in a foster family, and that's going fine until she goes through puberty and she's in high school, and the husband starts looking at her. And the wife, Elsie, who's played by Kirstie Alley, notices. And Elsie realizes that if she wants to, keep her marriage, that she's got to get rid of Norma Jean. And so she arranges to have her married off to a local boy who's just like a typical all-American. And Norma Jean loves the security of the marriage, and she really wants to have children, but her husband clearly doesn't understand her creative impulses or her desire to work. So when her husband enlists to fight in World War II, then Norma Jean works at an airplane factory where she's discovered by a photographer, and she begins modeling for cheesecake pictures and eventually divorces her husband to pursue a career in acting. So Norma Jean meets her agent, i.e. Shin, played by Wallace Shawn, who suggests that she dye her hair blonde and fashion a new star persona to get a contract with the movie studio. And Norma isn't really sure about this until she visits her mother, who's still in an institution. And Gladys's mental illness has become so bad she doesn't recognize her own daughter. And Norma is devastated, and she decides she's going to leave her old self behind and refashion herself as a blonde bombshell. So Shin arranges for the now blonde Norma Jean to have a private meeting with the studio head, Mr. R, before her audition for her first film role. And Mr. R rapes Norma Jean on the floor of his office. And she tries to pull herself together for the audition, but when she gets there, she's told that she already has the part because the rape was the audition, and she passed. So the studio assigns Norma a new name, Marilyn Monroe, And now the whole Marilyn persona is fully in place. And a small part in Asphalt Jungle launches Marilyn to stardom. But even after her breakthrough, she has to have sex with powerful men to secure more roles. Now, that's where part one of the miniseries ends. Then in part two, as Marilyn becomes more famous, as her star rises, she meets Cass Chaplin and Eddie G., the sons of Charlie Chaplin and Edward G. Robinson. And the three form a throuple, and they start living together. And eventually Marilyn becomes pregnant by one of them. And Marilyn always wanted a baby, but she realizes that these, alcoholic party boys can't be counted on to help her. And she doesn't have the money yet to support a child on her own. So she calls Mr. R for help, and he arranges an abortion. And Marilyn changes her mind on the way to the clinic, but she's under the studio's control now. She no longer has a choice. And the abortion is painful and traumatic, and it haunts her. And she has to move straight into her next film, which is Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. And she becomes dependent on pills and alcohol to get through the shoot. So now she's looking for security and safety. So Marilyn marries a retired baseball player, played by Titus Williver, who is supposed to be Joe DiMaggio, but he's never called Joe DiMaggio. And she starts to receive letters, supposedly from her long-lost father, promising a meeting. And Joe DiMaggio becomes jealous of Marilyn being a sex symbol, and he starts to beat her and wants her to quit movies, and they divorce. And so then next, Marilyn goes to New York City to study acting with Lee Strasberg, and meets a playwright who's supposed to be Arthur Miller, who's played by Griffin Dunne. And he and Marilyn fall in love, they get married, and it seems like a good match, but the drug addiction and her worsening mental health make their relationship really difficult. And then Marilyn becomes pregnant again, and she just wants to leave her whole career behind and her persona. But then the one thing she asked Miller to do was to not write about her. And she discovers that he is writing about her in his new play. And then she falls down the stairs and has a miscarriage. And not long after that, Cass Chaplin dies, and Marilyn learns that he was the one sending her the letters that were allegedly from her father, as this kind of cruel joke, I guess, for dumping him and aborting his child. So Marilyn goes on a bender, and she ends up passed out on the beach, which is the film's opening. And her relationship with Miller dissolves, and she falls deeper into addiction and mental illness. So then she has an affair with JFK, and she takes time off of her movie to sing to him on his birthday. And she jokes with her makeup artist about Secret Service men shooting her. And Marilyn at this point is in a complete pill-induced haze, but she manages to conjure up enough of the magic to perform Happy Birthday for the President. And then text on the screen informs us that Marilyn died shortly after of mysterious circumstances, and that she never was a mother. And yeah, so this is not a happy movie. Neither of these are happy movies. These are really, rough movies.
Very, very rough. Very actually to Gentlemen Prefer Blondes.
They're
The movies that she did were she was a comedian. I mean,
yes.
That she was funny. She was a comedian, a comedian in drag. And her best work was always, in my opinion, was comedy and being goofy, and that's what I liked. I mean, she was great in Don't Bother to Knock, but I really loved gentlemen prefer blondes and Lorelai Lee, and how she's like basically in love with, Jane Russell, and she's fronting
Yes.
it, with all these like diamonds. I love that movie so much. So
I know, I know. I feel like I should have come on as Jane, but I don't have the chest for it. Um,
the Midnight Shadow.
yeah, yeah. So Maryland TV movies are almost a genre to themselves. I counted, and there have been, not including Blonde, there have been 10 different TV movies about Marilyn Monroe since the 1970s. Just
10?
Yeah, 10. It's
Okay.
yeah, just there's Marilyn the Untold Story, Marilyn and Me, Marilyn and Bobby, Her Final Affair, Norma Jean and Marilyn, The Secret Life of Marilyn Monroe, Goodbye Norma Jean, all these.
Yeah.
So this is, just one.
Marilyn and Me is really bad. I saw that one. It's on TV. It's
Yeah.
really, it's like,
Yeah. Yeah. Goodbye Norma Jean is supposed to be pretty lousy too. And I think the sex symbol is like Connie Stevens playing her, which just, I'm sorry. I love you, Connie Stevens. But, so, so this movie was written, I thought you would be interested in this. So the writer, Joyce Eliason, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. She is actually TV movie royalty. She wrote over 20 TV movies, including Elvis and Me. She wrote Small Sacrifices with Farrah Fawcett. And she
love that movie. It's
and
so
she wrote
crazy.
and she wrote The Jacksons, An American Dream. And
I just watched that last night
really?
again. Yeah. I watched that again.
Yeah.
And it's just so good. That's a great movie.
Yeah. So she's
good.
got
Angela
so
Bassett
she's
is so good as Katie Jackson.
yes. So she's got cred, and she was also a co-producer on David Lynch's Mulholland Drive. So like I think she might have been involved in it when it was supposed to be a TV show, because originally it was supposed to.
Oh,
But
yeah,
anyway,
'cause it was.
and then the director, Joyce Chopra, she ended up in TV movies in a sort of roundabout way. She started out as a documentarian, and she started out working with D.A. Pennebaker, who's like a documentary legend. It's like him and Ken Burns. And then in the 70s, she directed her own documentaries, which were, critically acclaimed all throughout the 70s. And then in the mid 80s, she did her first fictional film, Smooth Talk, which was an adaptation of a Joyce Carol Oates short story starring Laura Dern in one of, I think, her first leading part. And it won the Grand Jury Prize at the 1986 Sundance Film Festival. And now it's been re-released by the Criterion Collection. And I have a poster of it in my apartment. I love that movie.
And you also had it on VHS.
I also had it on VHS.
You've
I
had
do.
that thing on VHS for a very long time.
I have.
Before it was cool.
Yes. Before every gay man in the entire world loved Laura Dern. I was there. I was there during the dry years, during the hard years. Anyway, then with Joyce Chopra, she was all set to have a big commercial breakthrough. And her next film was The Lemon Sisters with Diane Keaton and Carol Kane. And it was supposed to be her big breakthrough, but it was produced by Miramax, which was Harvey Weinstein's old company. And he used to be known, he's infamous for re-editing and requiring reshoots. People called him Harvey Scissorhands. And he did this to Mark Christopher in his film 54. And he did the same thing to her. It was delayed for a year with revisions, and then it finally was released, and it was a total flop and basically ended her theatrical filmmaking career. So then she went straight into TV movies, and she did the Pamela Smart story with Helen Hunt. And
I saw that too.
I saw the
Chad Allen's in that.
Yeah, Chad Allen,
he's really good. He's
Yeah.
so good in it.
Yeah. And then she did some TV movies with Gene Wilder, and Blonde was her last major TV movie. And what's interesting about the timing of all of this is that she wrote a memoir that's called Lady Director, Adventures in Hollywood, Television, and Beyond, that's coming out this November. And she talks about her experiences, as a female director in Hollywood, and all of the difficulties that she, faced. And so it's not out yet. I would love to read it, but it's not out yet. But I did get a sense that she understands the difficulties of being a woman in Hollywood, and was probably drawn to this material because of that in some way. So if you're looking for more info on the making of this film, then, check out her book next month. Now...
Nice plug.
Yes. Well, I figure, it's only polite. So now I thought we can talk about the movie, and I think with this movie especially, the main selling point of it, the main attraction of it, is Marilyn herself. So I wanted to start out talking about Poppy Montgomery as Marilyn, and then just the way that this movie sees Marilyn and treats her and all of that stuff. So this was Poppy Montgomery's first big break. She'd done small roles, but this was her first starring role. And then she ended up, doing TV series, doing police dramas for years after this.
She did Unforgettable. I used to nanny for the wardrobe costume designer on that show, and I have a signed autograph from Poppy.
Oh,
I do.
Now, what was your impression of her as Marilyn in this?
Okay, so honestly, I wanted to not like her because I wanted to go in and be like, she doesn't get her. Nobody gets her, And she did a good job.
Yes.
I really felt that she got the nuances. I always felt that Ashley Judd did the best Norma Jean ever that I've ever seen. Like, she had something in her I've never seen anyone bring to that character. Like, what she brought in that HBO movie was insane. And so I felt that Poppy really showed vulnerability and didn't play her as a sex object, which I have seen other actresses do. Like in Marilyn and Me, she's just like, like dumb and corny.
One thing that really impressed me was the way that Poppy used her voice in this, because she was very aware of Marilyn as a performance, and you could see her doing different levels of the Marilyn voice. When she was in front of the camera, then she was doing the full Marilyn Monroe voice. But then when she was out in public, she would do a slightly softened version of that, but it was still Marilyn. And then when she was in private, then she would be doing Norma Jean. But then when she was talking to men and needing something from them or trying to seduce them in some way, then you would see Marilyn showing up. And I thought the gradations of the Marilyn voice that she used was really smart and really showed the how it's not just Norma Jean or Marilyn, but how the two personalities kind of blended together. I also really liked. I think that she has. She doesn't look exactly like Marilyn, but she's got this kind of open, vulnerable, trusting face and this sort
Yeah.
of glow to her.
Yeah.
And I liked how she used, even though the circumstances are so difficult, she laughed a lot, and she would, even when she was in danger, then she would laugh. She would laugh nervously, and like giggling, and there was just I thought that there was a lot of range to the performance, and she was just hitting a lot of different levels with it emotionally in a way that felt very organic.
Yes, I agree with all that. I really have nothing to add because you went into detail.
Okay.
I mean, I
However,
really don't. Besides, I would just repeat what you said.
okay, good.
I really did like one of my favorite scenes was when we you didn't really discuss it in the plot outline, but in this show or in this miniseries, this TV movie, they show Marilyn in high school and they show her as her writing poetry and having like a kind of an affair with her teacher and her crying because she was laughed at during the audition for Romeo and Juliet. And I really loved how she played that. Like, she really looked cut open without being manipulative. Like, she was genuinely hurt, and it showed.
Yeah, all of the emotions are very close to the surface.
Oh, I always felt that other people always played Marilyn as a sexual manipulator in a way. They always kind of play Marilyn as this like, come on, guys, don't you know? Like, and it's insulting because that was the one thing they always play her. One thing that is repeated in both the New Blonde and both is she doesn't want to be a joke. You know, that's the whole thing is she doesn't want to be a joke, and yet all the TV movies play her as a joke, except Blonde and the Ashley Judd one, Norma
Yeah,
Jean and Marilyn. But
yeah,
but the actresses play her as a joke. They like not that, to be funny, but they play her the exact way she hated she was being perceived. And I felt that one thing about Poppy Montgomery's performance is that it had a lot. It was very dignified.
in speaking of her having a quality of dignity, I think that this film did, just speaking of their characterization of Marilyn, I think that they did a great job of showing her progression from this sort of dreamy little girl who just wants love, and then she just keeps being confronted by men who want sex from her. And she's not really interested in sex, but she sees that sex is a way to to get protection or to get love. There's a really great line where she's speaking about having sex with someone to get a role, and she says, "You're afraid that if you resist, you won't be loved or wanted or given a chance." And then there's another part, because there's sections in this movie where the characters are speaking to the screen in an interview style, as if it's a documentary, and they're being interviewed about Marilyn. And so then I think it's Eddie G, part of the thruple, says, "Oh, Marilyn wasn't interested in sex. She didn't know what to do with her body. She liked to look at it. She knew that it was magnetic, but she had no idea what to do with it. And I think they made that very clear, that it's like the promise of sex is going to get her what she wants, and so she may have to do that, but the sex is never the point.
No.
The point is about it's about
Safety.
safety. Yes, it's about being safe. It's about no longer feeling like this victimized child, and
Or
of
alone.
course, or alone.
Because
That
she
was the
says
thing.
that.
Yeah,
She says
keeps
that
saying,
with the baby, when she's living with her first husband before he goes off to war. She's like, one of the neighbor ladies has a baby, and she basically takes care of her. And she's like, "Oh, if I had, you would be the happiest person in the world." And she's like, "If I had a baby, I'd never be alone."
yes, and it's that. She doesn't want to be alone. She wants to be safe, and sex is something that she trades for that. But I think really the only time that she seems to enjoy it is with, Cass, Chaplin, and Eddie G in the
Yeah.
thruple. But then that turns out so badly for her that
And I think the reason maybe she enjoyed it was because she felt safe,
mm-hmm.
and she was responding to the safe environment they built for her, because they did.
Yes.
They did, especially in the book, because I have read the book, and
Yes.
the book is wonderful. I love the book. I read it and the thing is about that book is it still resonates with me, and I remember I read it before I went to film school, and I read it before I jumped into everything, and I remember hearing those words echo in my head when I was working and doing films and stuff, and feeling weird about things and wondering what was going to happen. And yeah, like a lot of it, it's a really good book. And the one thing I really like about the way that this TV movie handled the content was because so much it's a lot of it is told through third person anyway. And I liked that the characters talked right to the camera, like it was a documentary, because it gave us, in the book, there's so much inner dialogue, such as with Kirstie Alley's character. She plays the foster mom, and one of my favorite lines she says is, "I wish I could get rid of him and keep you." She says that to Marilyn.
That was a hell of a moment.
Yeah, that was a great moment. It was such a great moment because she says what Kirstie Alley says, like what the book says, that line about it's a man's world, and a woman has to do everything she can to protect herself from other women like Norma Jean.
Yeah.
Women that will, tempt their husbands for sex. Women that are prettier, younger, all those things, and unknowing, in a way.
Yes.
And so instead of just that, not being shown in any way, the character actually says it to the camera, which is great because they include something that was not included in the New Blonde movie at all. Like the foster, I don't even think they showed her.
No.
I forget.
No, in the New Blonde, they skipped straight from her going to the orphanage to a series of showing her cheesecake photos, and then they go straight from that to her walking up to Mr. R's office about to get raped.
Okay.
And so
so they left that out, which is important. Important because all those things were they were setting it up for why and how and yeah.
Yes, I really liked that. I thought that this film was, on one hand, the film was constructed in a very traditional way, in a very traditional biopic sort of narrative. And in fact, one thing that struck me was how much it reminded me of the Judy Garland TV movie Me and My Shadows, which is also a 2-part miniseries and came out the same year. And how that's also anchored around this great lead performance, and it has the sort of birth to death arc. But I loved how much attention it was paying to the psychology of the characters and what drove them, and what was going on in their heads, what maybe they weren't even conscious of that was driving them. And I felt like Joyce Ellison was really smart about the way that she built all of that into this traditional narrative.
I will tell you, the book is very thick, and there is a lot of intense character description and intense character insights. So I was surprised, actually, when I watched it, that she was able to glean so much narrative out of it, especially with one of the things they left out of the first or the second, the new Netflix movie, is how her first husband, was basically kind of exploiting her with those photos. It's like, wear this wig. And I loved how they showed that in Blonde. Like, she was like, I don't feel right with this wig on. I feel gross. And she was doing anything to make him happy. Oh my gosh. One thing I really liked was how that relationship with the photographer, and how that was very, that guy was so sleazy and scuzzy, and they showed him being very like, oh, you think now you have this contract there, you're better than me, you're not doing sleaze, and her having to do it because she needed money, the photo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true. But then it's interesting that they show all of these different ways that she can be abused by men, because there can be a guy like that who's transparently sleazy, but in a way he was being honest with her. He was being, he was never trying to pass himself off as something that he wasn't. And then you have her agent, I.E. Shin, who is saying, oh, I'll marry you and I'll leave you all of my money when I die, and then that will make you feel safe. And then she says, I can only marry for love. I can't marry someone for money. And then he dies and he doesn't leave her anything. Damn. And he is presenting himself as this savior, but really he is trying to prey on her and her dependence on him and their relationship in order to force something to happen that she clearly doesn't want to happen. And it's that nice guy. He's a nice guy, but really he's trying to victimize her as much as those sleazy men are.
Yeah.
So I appreciated that it showed that.
I do too.
Also, just as the last thing about the characterization of Marilyn, I liked that it showed very clearly that she was a hard worker, that it wasn't that she was lazy or that this stuff just happened by accident, and also how intelligent she was, while being constantly told that she was stupid. Yeah. And she wouldn't always show her intelligence in a way or occasionally she did, where she would say, "Oh, this is just like a Dostoevsky novel," and then she would be laughed at, and they would say, "You read Dostoevsky?" And everyone assumed that if she said something intelligent, that she had been coached to say it by a man. But even just, there was another scene with her and Shin where he was he was sort of lecturing her, and oh my God, wait a minute, I'm sorry. Oh yes, he's lecturing her about Cass Chaplin and how he invented her and what she's supposed to do. And then she just says, "Thank you, Daddy," and kisses him. And he's completely stunned and he doesn't know what to say. And she knows that's the smartest thing that she could have done. She just shut him the hell up. And suddenly now she has the power. And she knew exactly what she was doing there. And it shows that she does things that were smart, that did not necessarily use erudite language, but were very intelligent moves.
Yes. One thing that, now I'm bringing up another movie, the Norma Jean and Marilyn Monroe story, the
Yes.
Ashley Judd
And
one,
Mira Sorvino.
because I brought that, I saw that before I saw this movie, Blonde, and one thing that was really dark, and they did a really good job, and they showed her doing stuff like that when she was in orphanage and foster care and things like that, and she was being sexually abused by these older men. And that's one thing I really appreciated about this. They showed like her piano teacher, that in the book it's so creepy. Yeah, in the book it's a lot creepier.
Oh,
like,
I bet.
all that stuff in the book is way creepier, but in the movie they softened it a bit. But in this movie, when she's about 4 or 5, her mom has a piano, and she has one of the neighbors like gives her piano lessons, but he tickles her and he kisses in her ear, and Norma Jean goes over to him in front of her mom and tries to she's, blows on his ear, and she's like, "Come on, tickle me, come on, kiss me." And Norma Jean,
Because she thinks it's a game.
She thinks it's a game. She doesn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so all these things are happening to her when she's young, and unfortunately it's just like, wow, it's so heartbreaking, because you're like, to me, this is an archetype. Like, this is true. It's a trajectory of a lot of girls who are put in vulnerable situations by their family life. They're preyed on, and then they continue to follow that pattern because that's how society keeps them. Like, for instance, like, one of the smartest things in this book I absolutely love is the foster mother who wishes she could keep her, but she can't, because she knows that to keep her means she will lose her man. She will lose everything that she's dependent on. Even though she really does like Norma Jean, she can't keep her. That is, it's so sad, but that is often the way it is, and
yes, and she does not have she doesn't have very many supportive women in this movie. There aren't women taking her side. She's really going around trying to find men to protect her and help her. But I can't think of a single woman. The only instances of kindness from women that I can think of are her grandmother, very briefly Kirstie Alley, regretting forcing her to get married, and then the secretary right after she's raped by Mr. R, giving her an aspirin.
Yes.
While she's in the bathroom trying to fix her hair and get ready for the audition. But those are all, other than the grandmother, who's purely, both of those are tainted. It's like they're complicit in something and they feel bad about it, and they want to be nice to her, and yet because of their position, because she's working for this horrible man who routinely rapes women and she must know about it, she she can't do anything to protect her own position. And so there aren't any women who have her back.
And I feel like this is very accurate to even my lived experience, with everything. It's if I walked on set and I looked like this and I was going to direct, they would make fun of me. They would be horrible to me.
Yeah.
So it is a real issue still. I don't think it's ever going to change because of it won't change until I think it's this generation. Maybe Gen Z is still a little more open to, they're talking more about gender and presentation, and as men, like more men dress up like this, look like me, and I think that is when it will be more femmes will be able to be taken seriously. But no, I mean, people do that to me all the time. They're like, oh, you're the president of the board. I'm like, yeah. They're like, oh, you made feature films. I'm like, yes. If I'm the head of education, oh, you are. It is a constant issue that I have in my life, even with dark hair. I've had those situations where it's total prejudice and they get away with it. And what is interesting to me is our society totally accepts the hatred of women in pop culture. The radio is always calling women B words. There's movies where they're always chasing a blonde. They're always chasing a hot girl through the woods. Like, it's not like it's accepted in our society to see women to prey on. Like, they're beneath you, beat them up, take from them. It's okay. And that is something that she's experiencing constantly, is the outcome of that society. And I don't think it's changed. I think it's gotten a lot worse, honestly. I think that people are conditioned to hate femme women. I think so. I think that's it in a nutshell. People have been conditioned to see her as this happy, undignified joke blonde who had affairs with the Kennedys. I mean, ew, God. And that, they glamour. It conflicts with her licensed image, which she did not want done or profit off of. She did not want her face on T-shirts where she was like the sad blonde sex queen, she didn't want that. And that's what she's become, this sort of hollow, shallow symbol of something she doesn't want to be. Like, she didn't license her image to those things. And I think her image of being licensed to sell handbags on plates, to sell this idea of, like die young, stay pretty. What was troubling her? It's unhealthy in a way. And I think what people wanted to see is it's, a glamorous film. They didn't want to see how traumatized abortion can be to a woman, how miscarrying a baby can totally wreck your mental health. And that's one thing I really loved about this movie, was that they really, and I'm glad they did, because so often they always show like childbirth, like, and then the baby just came out, okay, or oh, and then she had the abortion, but they don't show the growth. Like, they don't show I love that they showed that. I'm so glad.
Well, this is in the Andrew Dominik one from 2022.
I loved it.
And they did have, I mean, the abortion scene in this was still, like, for TV. It was rough that she's there on the bed, and then she has this fantasy of like running off of the table and running into her childhood apartment, and it's on fire, and there's a baby crying, and she opens up the drawer that she used to sleep in, and it's her as a baby crying, and she screams, So I mean, it's really, it's not as though they're glossing over it. They just weren't allowed to, they weren't going to have a point of view vagina shot in the way that they did in the Netflix one. They couldn't have done that. Yeah.
I'm glad they did, because honestly, if you even have gotten a pap smear, it is invasive. It is horrible. It is so gross. It is just, ugh, just how invasive everything is. And I'm glad they showed that, especially with abortion being illegal now. Uh, pretty much they need to show how horrible, like how awful it is. Because I feel oftentimes with abortion, liberal men, lefties that I've dated have always been like, well, if you don't want to have a kid, just get an abortion. It's like, no, no. It's not like a procedure you just go get. Like, you are ending something. Whether you think you're not, you are. And it's not going to be easy to do it or to raise the baby or to give it away. There's no easy way. But often I feel like it's pop culture is like, well, I had an abortion. I just walked it off. Wow. Well, I'm glad that you're a tough human, because a lot of women I know who are afraid to speak up or afraid, they've been traumatized by both, by having a child, by having an abortion. Both have been equally as traumatizing for them. It's what I'm trying to say is, like, there's so much controversy around abortion, like, and I'm really glad they showed it, because it's something that needs to be talked about right now. It's something that we all need to have real conversations about, not this hyperbolic in theory, because what's being lost in the theory of it is the emotional journey, the emotional well-being of women who have to just make these choices.
Yeah, and I think
everyone just has a problem with it being a
Oh, I was just going to say that I remember that you'd said to me that that you subscribe to this sort of this stuff that Sinead O'Connor had said about abortion, which is that people should be able to make the choice whether they want to have it or not, and that either one of those is a legitimate choice. You should be able to make that choice, but it's like it's not an easy thing to be taken lightly.
No, it isn't. It definitely isn't. But I do feel that a lot of lazy men who call themselves feminists and who call themselves liberals always err on the side of, oh, I got my girlfriend pregnant, she should get an abortion because I don't want to be a dad right now. And that is, it's like, once again, It's not about you. It's not about you. And I see that a lot. And I don't like that. I think that's bullshit. It goes back to the sexual revolution being just for the pleasure of men, not for at all the pleasure of women or the safety of women. So it's fucked up. I don't know what to say. Like, it's like, the truth of it is that it's hard, and I think that we aren't having talks about how pregnancy affects women and what it does to women. We aren't talking about any of these things. Like, the more that we push things that we don't like under the rug, whether it's sexual abuse, whether it's abortion, whether it's teen pregnancy, the more that horrible things are going to happen. So I believe we have just, I like am a no judgment of anybody. I would prefer people just to tell me how they feel, because once they tell me how they feel about something, we can talk about it and move past shame and figure out what do you need, what would make you feel better about something, how are you going to deal with it, how are you going to be healthy. But you can't if you're ashamed of it, if you're terrified of it. And that's the problem with abortion, is like, as soon as you say it, it's like trigger, and for me it's just like another day at the office. I mean, for me, because it was like my grandfather was the president of Right to Life Indiana, and like I knew about abortion before I knew about sex. And it's just one of those things where I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sick of dealing with this. I'm so sick of it. It's so annoying. But on the other hand, it's something you shouldn't be forced to have a kid. You shouldn't be forced, especially the way you're treated once you do, which is terrible. You're left alone. It just infuriates me. And I'm down for the talk. I'm down for the nuances of this situation and conversation, because I do know there's women who've been traumatized and haunted by whether or not they had an abortion. And I also know there's women who are haunted by the fact they had kids. So, yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
What was I talking about?
Well, we were well, I think the next thing that I had that I wanted to talk about to talk a little bit about the look of the 2001 film, the cinematography, and what we thought about it. Oh, kitty.
Go
And
ahead.
I mean, I thought the film looks very good. It clearly had a big budget. The recreations of Marilyn's famous scenes, however, are really not. They didn't have enough of a budget to do that. The gentlemen prefer blondes. Diamonds are a girl's best friend. That wouldn't have passed muster on a drag race runway. That was not a strong point of this movie. The historical recreations, they didn't have the budget, I think, to be able to do it properly. Some of the costumes looked good. I mean, she always looked good, but that was one way in which the new one definitely sort of laps this one. But even though the film, the 2001 Blonde, was structured in a pretty traditional way, I think that they had a few moments that were very cinematic. And there was one scene in particular where Marilyn is on a bender and she goes on a Ferris wheel. She stumbles drunkenly into a carnival and goes on a Ferris wheel with this little
Yes.
girl and is like, "Do you know that I'm Marilyn Monroe?" And and there's this close up on her face and she's very, very, very high and having some kind of episode. And and it just follows her as the Ferris wheel goes around. This tight close up on her face, and I think that's a great shot. That was a really cinematic moment where you're like, okay, this is a director. She's really making a choice here. Just to speak briefly, if there's any sort of supporting performances that made an impression on us, we spoke a little bit about Kirstie Alley and what we liked about her. And
Oh, I
then
love Gladys, the mom.
Gladys, yes, who's Patricia Richardson from Home
From
Improvement,
Home
which
Improvement.
you would never think that she had that in her, but she
No.
really.
These scenes were not included in the remake, the Netflix movie, but I love her and her mom sitting outside of Rudy Valentino's mansion, and she's like, he couldn't act for anything, but he knew when to die. I love
Yeah.
that moment where, the mom is, sitting in the car and the way she says it, just the way she carried herself, because she really showed, like, I feel like the way they directed the mom in part one was already like she was scary, or in Blonde, the remake, was that her mom was already scary, but in this, it was like, no, her mom was so fun and, charismatic, and that's why it must be so confusing for her, the child, Norma Jean.
Yes, I that was one thing. I was in the new one. I was very struck. I think that actress did an amazing job, but that mother was straight from a horror movie in the 2022 Blonde. She was just this naked screaming monster.
Yeah.
And this was a much more human Gladys, who you could see she had a sense of fun, she had a sense of theatricality, but then you could see her mental illness getting worse. You could see sometimes she was lucid, and then sometimes she was like, went full mommy dearest and was like, "We have to clean you, scrub you clean."
Yeah.
And I think she was able to really play many levels with that. So she was never just a monster or a joke or something like that.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite performances because she was so fun. And like she almost seemed like you could see in that performance how her daughter would look up to her and how they got along and how it was like our little secret are these movies and poetry, because that was the biggest thing is they always showed in the miniseries is that, you know, Norma Jean loved poetry and her mom would read her poetry. And then when she was in high school, she read, you know, was
She wrote
writing
poetry,
poems,
yeah.
and she wrote poetry, and she had an affair with like her English teacher because he supported her poetry. And then when she meets her first husband, he's always like, "You're saying funny words all the time like fate. Why do you use funny words, you know?" And it already kind of showed her disconnect like from men who wanted her for the sex and the domestic, like the role, whereas she wanted someone who engaged with her dreaminess. When I feel like Cass Chaplin did, and that's why she probably felt safe with him,
Yeah.
because
And
in many ways they reminded me a lot of her mom, like
yes.
the good parts of her mom.
Yes.
The three the thruple
The thruple. Yeah, yeah. The Gemini,
thruple
they called
the three-way?
themselves. They were like, we're the Gemini, but there's three of
The
us.
Gemini, yeah. I felt that they reminded me a lot of the good times that she had with her mom, because you know they were all dreamy and they made her feel safe. So I could see why she, you know, the only time in the book at all she enjoys sex is with them too.
Yes. Yes. And
And I really did like Patrick. I will say this: I preferred the Geminis the made for TV movie over the New Blonde. They had more charisma. They
Oh.
seemed like they actually were more complicated than just malicious. In the new one in Blonde 2022, they're more malicious. They're just like, yeah.
they're just
They came off really less than zero, like
They
Brenton
came off-
Easton Ellis.
they came off kind of like sex demons.
Sex
They
demons.
were like sex demons. They were like, yeah, yeah,
Lewis,
you
that's what
want
I call
it.
you. I call
Yeah.
you a sex demon. I call you a sex demon.
But I'm a benevolent one. But they were, I got that
sex
sense
angel.
where, yes, where they were just a, you said to yourself, why would anyone put any sort of trust in these guys who are clearly bad news? And I guess
Yeah.
whereas the ones in the miniseries, you could see how they were so handsome and charming that she would have fallen into this fantasy with them in the way that you do with handsome and charming men. And then when the chips are down, you realize, oh, they're just little boys who just want to have fun, and they're like, oh, I'm not having fun anymore. But yeah, I liked that. I also think I haven't seen it really spoken about in reviews of the miniseries, but I think the actress who plays the young Norma Jean, Skye McCole Bartusiak, I think that she's really good.
She was excellent.
Yeah. And she had a lot of times with child actors, you feel like they're just playing themselves or sort of a generic child. But she had such a specific characterization of this very sensitive child who is learning what the world is like from these horrible circumstances and then adjusting herself and the way that she relates to the world in relation to that. And I just thought, I was a little confused why it was a blonde child because Norma Jean was a brunette, but I won't hold that against her. I think she gave a great performance.
Well, I think when she was a little kid, when she was born, she was blonde. Her hair didn't get brunette until she hit puberty.
Oh, so it's accurate then. Okay. All right. My mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. I mean, how are
so
you supposed to know?
yeah.
I'm a Marilyn scholar.
Scholar. Yes. Um,
Scholar.
so so to sum up this thing, then I guess, what did you think that the movie did well, and what did you think that it did not do well?
Okay. I thought that it did a really good adaptation of the book and really gave
Mm-hmm.
insight into. I thought they adapted it brilliantly. Um, and I thought that they really did a good job showing her early life better than any other film has, showing
Yes.
how difficult it was. And it lost to me what it lost its steam when it got to her um marriage to Arthur Miller, the playwright, was when it was losing its oomph. Um, and it's interesting to me because for me, Blonde and this up Netflix Blonde, that's where to me it got a punch was when I really loved how the film handled her relation, the playwright. As soon as she got to New York, I really loved everything they showed in Blonde up until the end. I really liked how they showed. This is the Netflix movie. I thought everything. It was like two movies that I could glue together. It would be these. It would be the made for TV movie of 2001 and the Blonde, the Netflix movie Blonde, because they both kind of complemented each other in many ways. Um, because they feel unequal. They feel like the skills aren't equal, but when you put them together, it feels more corrective. Like you get a better idea of the book Blonde, uh, and mental illness that blonde, that they were saying Marilyn had and things like that. I mean, honestly, like if I had to live in isolation in Hollywood, you know, like think about it. You're an actor who's longing to be for human connection and you're totally isolated and you're surrounded by narcissistic predators. I mean, are you going to be a mentally healthy person? Probably
Yes, and
not.
and she, it ran in her family, so she was already predisposed towards it. But yeah, yeah, no, I understand, and I think that also this version, as much as I liked it, it did flub the ending. The ending really lacked punch. Just having some text over her singing "Happy Birthday, Mr. President," was not the ending that it deserved. But I don't know who made that creative decision,
Yeah.
to end it there, but I felt like that
I
was
don't know either. I mean, I
underwhelming.
felt really cut for time. Yeah,
Yeah,
it felt cut for time. Like I
yeah.
remember watching this movie in in Boston. I remember watching this with a group of crusty punks. I remember watching the ending. We did not watch the beginning. We watched the ending with a group of crusty punks. And I remember we were watching it and we were assuming they were going to show like her, the night she dies and all those kinds of things. And like, we're watching the makeup artist go, nobody's saying anything bad about Miss Marilyn Monroe. She was the only one that was human. And then it ended and we were like, what happened? Wait, what? What's going on? Like we were all lost. Yeah, we were very confused. But I do love I love how they showed the relationship with her makeup artist because in the book that is one of my favorite sections of the book is her and her makeup artist creating Marilyn and him understanding her because like it's from the point of view of the makeup artist and how he would watch her and how much empathy he had for her. That is something I felt both movies really got equally good. Was the Netflix one I love that scene where they're making her come to life, but also how he was on the set of something, Some Like It Hot, and was like, if she was, you know, could be well, she would be, and all those things. I loved the makeup artist because in the book, the makeup artist is very much like it's so gut wrenching when you read the book. It's so gut wrenching because at that point, she's so surrounded by just people who are like, what's wrong with her, what got you know, it's horrible, this moment where she is in life at in this in the book, and the makeup artist is like feeling for her and is like on her side, and the it's so good, and I thought they
Yeah.
did a really good job with that, both movies.
Yeah. So then to take it to the 2022 uh, Blonde, I thought one thing, I did a little bit of research, and I thought it was interesting to know some of the things that he'd said about his intentions for the movie. He'd said things like, "I'm not interested in reality. I'm interested in the images." So I selected every image of Marilyn I could find and then tried to stage scenes around those images. And so one of the things that was commented on about this film is that it keeps swapping aspect ratios and switching between color and black and white. And everyone was trying to figure out some sort of logic behind that. And apparently it's that he had all of these reference photos, and whatever that reference photo looked like, whatever that reference shot looked like, then he would do that same aspect ratio, that same color, that same thing. And so that was part of the sort of like technical conceit of it, that it was based around recreating these images. And
I think that's a really good artistic choice, and I could see that, especially because she always had one of the things about her, as I'm wearing the turtleneck.
mm-hmm.
I mean, the iconic Marilyn turtleneck that I'm wearing was
Yeah,
not on a set, was not in a movie. It was when one of her private photographers that would always follow her around was always shooting her at home, looking and walking. You know, some of the most favorite, for instance, the famous photo we have of her with her skirt flying up, that was a photo. That wasn't, it's not even in the film, 7 Year Itch. It's not even in, you know, her skirt flying up. That
they
was
yeah they
candid
have a
shots taking of her. Some of her most iconic things are publicity stills or her private photographers shooting photos of her. Um, and I think that's brilliant that the director did that, especially with the Arthur Miller moments, like when she got married to him. And
oh
I loved that they showed her running and being happy, because I have all those photos of her on her wedding day with him, and she is genuinely happy in those photos. And I really did enjoy how like they treated those moments, because it did, when I was watching the scenes with her in the actor's studio, if you've ever seen photos of her in the actor's studio at that time, they're all shot in black and white, and she doesn't have a lot of makeup on. She, you know, just has very minimal, and she's wearing her turtleneck, and uh they shot it like that, and I was like, oh yes, they took, because what I liked is I felt like I was in that time and space, the headspace that they both were in, and the, you know, when they met, when they were working. And I really loved that they brought that element, because the one thing that we love about Marilyn is her image, you know, her image
yes
that we have of her. And to use all that material in the fictional historical fiction telling of her life is brilliant, and I'm glad he used that. I'm glad he used that material.
yeah, you know. And so then he'd also said that he was not particularly interested in Marilyn until he read the book, and he was interested in telling a story about an unloved child and what that does to somebody. And so that was what he was interested in. And there was one particular exchange that got some attention, where he and an interviewer were talking about gentlemen prefer blondes, and where he said Marilyn is somebody who's become this huge cultural thing in a whole load of movies that nobody really watches, right? Does anybody watch Marilyn Monroe movies? And they said, well, I do. A lot of my colleagues and friends do. Gentlemen Prefer Blondes is one that we watch a lot. And he said, really? What's it about? I mean, he knows, he's seen it, but And they said, well, it has a worldview that's very cynical about men and gender relations in a way that I think a lot of contemporary young women like, and it affords Marilyn's character the credit of her wit, and she gets one-upsmanship on men. She's not a dumb blonde. And then he says, well, it's cynical about women too. And the interviewer says, well, yes, maybe, but it's glamorous. It's a fantasy. And then Andrew Dominik said, what, because they're well-dressed? And the interviewer said, sure. And he said, well,
Oh my God, is
and he
he
said,
straight?
and he said, they're well-dressed whores. I don't know. And so that,
Brad Pitt, why
that-
did you give this guy?
well, because I think, like, I don't mean to put Andrew Dominik on blast like this,
Well.
but I think that it was important to establish that, because I think one of the things that I noticed about this film is that it's a completely unsentimental film. It's interesting that, the last film that we were talking about nostalgia a lot. And I think that this film, the 2022 Blonde, is one of the most unnostalgic films that I've ever seen. It's very suspicious of nostalgia, and it goes out of its way to show us iconic moments that we would go, oh, I recognize that, and then completely change the way that we're perceiving it and turn it into a very dark moment. And even just the act of being a fan of Marilyn and observing her it's suspicious about that. And there's a very intense scene where she's at the premiere, I think, for the 7 Year Itch, and then all of these men are like looking at her, and they're screaming, and then their mouths start to warp and become that is
Monsters.
and become monsters. And she's looking at them and saying, I love you all. And it's very cynical about that. It's not giving us a romanticized version of the star fan relationship or of anything. This is a very unsentimental, unnostalgic kind of film. Which is, I think, a lot of times people who are interested in seeing these films are the type of person who watches a lot of Turner Classic Movies, who wants to go, "Aw, I know that scene. Oh, I recognize that." And at each instance, it stops you and says, "No, you're not going to enjoy this. I'm going to, here's some shit, and I'm going to rub your nose in it." Which
it does that. I mean, literally the most famous number is and they both do it. They both do this. They both literally do this.
Mm-hmm.
Both movies. The most iconic. Oh, it should be the best moment of her life when she's like, does diamonds are a girl's best friend, and gentlemen prefer blondes, which should be like, oh, she's made it, and it's so fun. She gets the applause. She says, I killed my baby for this. And it's like...
That really hits you. That hits hard.
Good job. Good. That was a good movie. Okay. I guess I'm not going to watch that the same again. Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is that he shows us doing it, whereas, like, I mean, they both show it. They both show her wanting to go back and stop it, and so yeah, you're right.
But
I
this
don't wanna
one,
give him too much credit.
Well, no, but I think this film is
obviously he saw the
2022 Andrew Dominik's Blonde is a film of images. It's very much focused on images, and I think that's one of the strengths. I think that there's a genuinely dreamlike quality to this movie. Everything has a symbolic weight. I don't think that anybody could watch this movie knowing very much about Marilyn and say, oh, this is an accurate depiction of her life, because it's done in such a stylized way that you know that this is a stylized thing, that this is an allegory. And the recreations of those scenes are absolutely amazing. And I have to give him credit for just these incredible images and these great performances. I'll say that and that it's with the tone of it, it more than a biopic, it almost plays like a horror movie.
Yeah.
It feels like a horror movie about Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah, it's great. That's one thing I liked about it.
Yeah. One thing. Yeah, it was an A24 movie about Marilyn Monroe. One thing,
which I think would be genius.
Yeah. No, it's I think the one thing that bothered me about his visual sense is that I think that by relying so much on recreations, and he would have these clever moments where Marilyn was having sex with the Gemini guys in bed, and then the bed turns into a waterfall, and then suddenly we're seeing the trailer for Niagara, and then the trailer says a torrent of crashing passion, and that's while she has an orgasm, or then she's having she has a miscarriage, and then right after that they're on the set of Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, and they're playing Bye Bye Baby, Remember You're My Baby, and there are these moments that it's like little clever little things, but I think that what those things ended up doing was they would always interrupt very, very emotional moments, showing her going to the orphanage and being so traumatized by that. And then suddenly they cut to all of these sort of animated pictures of her doing cheesecake. And I felt like that kept me at an emotional distance from Marilyn. Every time that I really wanted to get deeply involved with her, then he would do something clever. And then I would be reminded, oh, I'm watching a movie. Oh, yeah, I'm supposed to. And I think that was intentional on his part. I don't think that was, I think he was doing that on purpose to make us look at it. I guess it's, what is that Brechtian device? He was using those as a sort of Brechtian device to make us aware that we're watching a movie and to not get too caught up in it.
I mean, but see, I don't know if it was that much of a Brechtian device, because it didn't come off like that to me. It came off as, I mean, I could see what you're saying, but it felt way more it's like somebody who didn't want to emotionally commit to making an audience feel something more so than a Brechtian device.
Yeah.
Because, there's a difference. Like, I've seen directors who I felt I could see, like, for instance, the director who redid Hairspray and did Rock of Ages, who made those in musicals. If you watch his movies, they're all sexually. This is a man I can tell is afraid. He is afraid of sex. He is afraid to confront his own sexuality in a serious way. So what he does is he makes fun of it in this childish way, and it just doesn't come across. It doesn't sell. It just is corny, and it gets in the way of the story in those movies, especially Rock of Ages. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah. And
that's how I kind of felt with this. This is a person who doesn't want to commit. And that's funny that you brought those up, because he says he wants to tell the story of an abused child who wasn't loved. But we didn't spend a lot of time on her childhood in showing how she wasn't loved, that she went to an orphanage.
Yeah. And I think
in the remake.
and and then some of these towards the end, there were certain ironic touches that really like genuinely pissed me off. Like during the JFK scene, which I know that's supposed to be rough, and like watching Anna de Armas simulate giving a blowjob, that was an experience. I mean, kudos to her
But
for like
I
going
loved that.
there.
Yeah.
But then
Well,
when he's getting turned on, and then they show on the TV like the missiles, like the missiles rising up, I was like, that is childish. That's like snickering and childish, and that's a cheap gag to be putting in this very upsetting scene. And I resented him for that.
I mean, I definitely could see why. The one thing I liked about that scene in particular, though, was that it showed her thinking about other things.
Yes, yes, as we all know.
I was like, okay, I like that she's like, what am I? Why do I always end up like this? Oh, blah, blah. Like she's just kind of like going through it, but she's also like thinking about something else. And I also like that it showed how gross men are. Like, how gross they're just like, come on, because that to me really shows like that was accurate.
Yeah, that
In
they're
my
really just gross,
like
and they
that
don't
scene
care.
and the
They don't
brutality
care
of
if
it,
you
and her being confused.
and they don't particularly care. They don't particularly care if you want to, if what the situation is. They're just like, I just want this. Like, why can't you just give me the thing that I want?
Yeah, they don't care they don't care what
Or if
what
you're
you
enjoying
think
it
you're
or
there
what.
for at
Yeah.
all. Yeah, and I thought that was really, really, really well done. I like that. I like that it showed that she was like often like I liked, and I also liked that in a way it showed like how degrading he was, that he wasn't like this upstanding wonderful man, because JFK often gets praise for everything, and like I've heard men say, oh yeah, Marilyn was just this like messed up like whore, and I'm like, oh god, it's like, listen to you talk, like get out of here, like no, she
Yeah.
he like ugh like
Yeah. Any scene that is traumatic or affecting in the other film, it's like 10 times that in the new film. He really goes to much more horrifying, chilling places with this material. It really, and you're like, oh my God, he's not gonna, take it all the way to that, and then he does. And I think, so I appreciate that it's really going there and showing us the ugliness of these situations. But I wish that it had a more well-rounded human characterization of Marilyn, because I think in this film I didn't understand her or why she was doing things as much as I did in the miniseries. And sometimes it just felt like she was just this person that had terrible things happen to her, and she was just going from terrible thing to terrible thing. And I saw some of the psychology, and there were scenes, like her with Arthur Miller. There were scenes where you could really see her thinking and things working, but I missed the psychological complexity of the other film. And I think that because of those two things, of that sort of lack of character development and the those cute touches that were so emotionally distancing at critical moments, it made it sometimes where I was like, I just felt numb watching these terrible things. I was like, oh God, another bad thing's going to happen to her, isn't it? Oh shit. But
I felt like it was pretty accurate to my own life, so I
yeah,
didn't feel
no,
horrified. I was actually like, it's one of those things when I watched Dancer in the Dark or Dogville, where I'm like, finally, someone gets it. Whereas like, and then I'll be in a room full of like, I don't know, just other people who don't see it that way, and they're like, "You think this is, Lars Van Trier is a sexist?" And I'm like, well, you know what? This shows more of an accurate depiction of like my experience as a female in this world, like Dogville does, and that's why I felt like with this, I was like, finally, someone gets it. Like,
Yeah.
you know, they show how gross things are. They show like how they show just how they showed it. Like they get it. Like that's how I feel about it. Oh, they get it, and they're showing it good. Because that's how it is, and that's one of the things that irritates me when people are like, "Oh, she didn't deserve this," and I'm like, "But wait. Like, if it's true to the experience, if it's true to like the mythology, it's like, what do you think? You know, what do you think it's like being a beautiful woman in this world? Do you think it's fun? Do you think it's full of free shit, good food? No, it's horrible. Like, it's not fun. You're alienated from other women, and men prey on you all the time, and everyone thinks you're dumb.
Yeah.
You really have only one thing the world wants from you. I mean, and that's been my experience. You have to, you know. So
yeah.
I don't know. There were things,
and
I wasn't
I did
horrified. I was like, finally someone gets it. So I guess I guess it's different.
Well, I mean, I was horrified, you know, for her, and just that, you know, I was watching these, you know, these awful things happen. I wasn't horrified in like, I'm shocked, I'm offended sort of way. I just mean like, this is you know, oh my God, this is a horrible thing to be happening to a person.
Yeah.
But
they better show that in my movie. They better show all the horrible things that people have done to me. I want everyone to see it. I want them to see it because you know what? Like, I deserved better, and so did she.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I want people to know. And look, this is the other thing is like, you know, I do wish they showed the death scene as her being murdered, not as her accidentally swallowing all these pills, or I don't agree with how they showed her death scene. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
But it is
well,
accurate. It's more accurate to the book.
And I didn't like that they put in a cute little thing where all of a sudden she turns around and then recreates that famous photo, or her spirit comes out of her and then recreates that famous photo of her in the bed with the white sheet over her. And that again was like just when my heart was breaking, then there was this cute little thing that pulled me out of it, and I was like, why did you do that? I was really feeling something, and then you had to do that. Ugh. But
yeah,
it did.
I think that's like somebody who, it reminds me of somebody like that would be staring at you across the room, and you think you're going to kiss them, and then they're just like, and they keep interrupting the moment. Like, and why don't we do this? You know, that's the feeling I get from all these devices, is that's the type of person they are on that emotional level. Oh, we're getting really intimate. Oh, I'm going to pull back because I'm afraid to go there. I'm really afraid to take you there. And
well, I mean, because he took us there. He took us there in some ways, you know. I mean, we literally have the POV of like Marilyn vomiting on us, you know. Like he took us there, but for some reason, I think that he saw her as a symbol in many ways, you know, like as a symbol as much as a person, and there was a bit of this like remove, because she was this symbol, you know, whereas I really wanted to go deep inside of her head and rather than that. But anyway, yeah, I don't, I think that Ana de Armas really did an incredible and fantastic job. I mean, she really,
she's so good.
Everything that he asked her to do, she went there 1,000%. What did you think of her
And
her Marilyn? Like her
oh,
Marilyn in contrast
fantastic.
to Poppy's Marilyn.
Well, it's hard because I don't feel like we spent a lot of time. So here's the thing: is I felt that Anna's performance was, uh, uh like she always looked tormented the way that I always see Marilyn. Like she always
Mm-hmm.
seemed very contemplative. Like Marilyn always seemed, I don't want to say tormented, but she always seemed like, she was like confused and she was deep in thought trying to organize her creativity. And I appreciated that. And I felt it was the right interpretation of Marilyn for that movie.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
that movie. I feel like if she took that interpretation and put it into the made for TV movie, it would felt imbalanced.
It would have felt
It
like
wouldn't.
why is she always so like tense and tortured and yes, we would have. There's definitely a Poppy had a sense of kind of vitality and lightness that she could show that I don't think was there as much. I think every time that Anna's Marilyn was performing, it felt very much like she was performing sexiness. You didn't see it come naturally out of her as much. There wasn't that same kind of lightness where that you could see with Poppy's, but there was this Marilyn was constantly having horrible things happening to her. And so, when are we supposed to see her? We don't really see her in a relaxed moment where that would be coming through. We don't really see her in a place where she feels safe enough. Maybe when she's with Arthur Miller, then you see some of that sense of fun and intelligence and things coming through. And that scene I
Yes.
thought was great, and I thought
Yeah.
Adrian Brody was wonderful
Oh,
as Arthur Miller.
wasn't
I
he
thought
was so good.
yeah, that was really the standout supporting performance, I thought.
My favorite moment, my favorite moment was him like, and listen, in all the TV movies I've watched of Marilyn, I never liked her period, you know. I never liked her time after Joe DiMaggio. I've always been like, "Oh god, another husband who annoys me."
Hmm.
Um but when he's walking up and it's in black and white and the photo, his script flies away and he has the photo and he's like, "Oh, my Magda," and like, and then he's totally like annoyed that the movie star is gonna read his play, and then she goes to speak and then it cuts to the applause and he's like moved, and I was like, I had goosebumps in their conversation when he was that was my favorite moment in the whole movie,
Yeah,
was their conversation about the play. And he was like, and she was saying, "Oh, it's like the cherry orchard, she doesn't really go through any change, it's like, that character goes through so much change, but your Magda's like perfect, and she never changes." He's like, "No, she never changes." And I love that back and forth between them, and how she gives him some feedback and he's like, "Oh my god, that's why she can't read." That's,
that was the
that,
that was the turning
and
point.
you
I
see
thought,
right there they already had that connection that made her feel safe.
yeah, I thought that was a smart, dramatic choice to have him go into that meeting not wanting to like her, and then liking her more and more, not being able to help it. And then there's a turning point where she says something that's so insightful that gives him that completely reframes the way that he thought about the woman in his real life who had inspired this character. And then suddenly he's there with her, and that was the
Yes.
push and pull of that whole scene was so fantastic. And it's hard because you really do, in both of these movies, when she's with him, it does seem like he's good for her and you want things to turn out well for her, but at that point I think she's been through so much, and her mental illness is progressed enough that it's just become very difficult. And just, that marriage is just really fraught and difficult. And she's in such a bad place that, like, he's trying to be supportive, but, you know, and then of course, when he writes about her, then that's sort of the final straw. And she's like, I can't trust you.
I love how they showed that, though. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's that's
I love
especially
how they showed that.
It's especially heartbreaking because you don't get that feeling from Joe DiMaggio or from the Geminis or anything like that. You don't get the feeling of, oh, maybe this will work out. You're just like, oh, what are you doing, Marilyn? But do you think that this guy isn't going to beat you? He's totally going to beat you. But it's heartbreaking to see that this marriage that's based on a genuine connection just dissolve.
And the one thing that's shocking to me in this movie, which I was surprised, because he's talking about image and some of the best some of the best still photography that I've seen has been from the Misfits. I'm just surprised that they didn't go into that, like that they didn't show any,
anything from the Misfits,
any footage or any go into that, huh?
Yeah, exactly. That they didn't show anything from the Misfits, that there weren't any recreations of that they didn't go there. They sort of made it seem like the marriage was falling apart with Some Like It Hot, as opposed to going further. I guess it's that they were condensing time. But yeah, no, I agree. I would have loved to have seen that, because that's
especially
even worse.
Because the dad. Yeah. And the dad, because in in real life, her mom told her Clark Gable was her dad. That's true. She told Marilyn Monroe or Norma Jean Gladys told her that Clark Gable is your dad, and she had that photo. So that photo is supposed to be Clark Gable. But what is interesting to me is like that's something that was not used. It was only used in the miniseries, the TV movie, where they show her meeting a movie star, and she's like, "Oh," and it's brief. It's so brief.
That she briefly meets Clark Gable, and then she starts to tell him that she always thought, that maybe they could be related in some way, and he just sort of gets away really fast from it. But
it's like, you're not the first one.
But to make a whole movie with this person who you grew up thinking was your father, and then after the movie, he dies of a heart attack, which was maybe brought on by him doing his own stunts with those horses. And, that's got to, in a film that I think, Marilyn her production company was doing it, and her husband was writing it. And so this was very much her thing. So that must have been incredibly just devastating.
Well, my dad, who would talk about old movies a lot with me, told me, I remember we were looking at old photo books of movie stars, and there was a photo of Montgomery Clift and Clark Gable and Marilyn out west with the horses, and he said, this is the last movie any of these people made. They all died after they made this movie. And then he proceeded to tell me that when that Clark Gable had a heart attack after he made the movie, and Marilyn would call his wife and apologize because she believed it was her fault all the time. And he told me this when I was real little. So I always remembered that. I always remembered and pictured her being in hysterics, thinking she killed him, calling him. And I feel like that's something, if you want to, that. since we're torturing her.
Yeah. Well, and also this movie, I think it's very telling that the miniseries opens with a shot of her conflicted relationship with her mother, even when she was born. But it's about her relationship with her mother, and I think that her relationship with her mother is really the through line throughout the miniseries. The Andrew Dominik movie, it opens with her mother showing her the picture of her father. And her father is the thing that looms large over this movie, over the 2022 movie. And it's all about her looking for, a man to fill the shoes of her father and looking for her father. And the thing that really destroys her completely and pushes her to kill herself directly after is finding out that those letters were not from him. And so it's a movie all about, the father figure, the absent father figure. So that would have been a place to go, but I guess, they were already at like 3 hours. So maybe there was a draft with that in it.
I think that's interesting because the through line for the book is more about the mother.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's the one that's, I don't want to be stereotypical, but the movie that's made by the woman focuses on the mother-daughter relationship, and the one that's made by the man focuses on the father-daughter relationship.
You're right. There's a cat behind me. He's meowing.
So anyway, I would say my last thing to say about these two movies sort of compared with each other is that I really loved aspects of both of these movies, but I wish that that a screenplay that was as psychologically astute as the one from the miniseries was being used, that there was more attention paid to her childhood, to what was drawing, rather than just focusing on images so much. But that sort of script had the kind of visual inventiveness and the kind of budget and the kind of freedom and guts, literally, that this movie had, so I think you were saying it earlier that you wish that the both of these movies, could be melded into one, and that
Yes.
would be, and I feel that same way, that, the miniseries is missing that visual inventiveness. But then, so I'm glad that I watched both of them back to back, that was a hell of a day. That was a day. But I do feel like the sum of both of these maybe makes a film that I would feel completely good about. But each of them on their own, I think I lean more towards the miniseries. I think I would watch the miniseries more often. But if someone were to say which one would you return to, but I think that they both have amazing things about them.
I see myself returning more to the miniseries, because I can have it on and I can cook.
Yes.
Whereas I feel like Blonde is a Lars von Trier movie. It's like a Lars von Trier light movie.
Yeah.
But I do. I mean, I feel like it would be it would be a good horror movie, in that way. I don't know. I like both. I think they serve different purposes.
Yes.
The book is excellent. Yeah, I do like them both. I think they both had things in them that I like. I do think that Marilyn Monroe, I like the ending of the miniseries when she's like, oh, these secret service men are going to kill me. And I'm like, hint, hint, hint,
Yep.
America.
All right.
Because her sister, There's a book called My Sister Marilyn. Her stepsister, her half sister wrote, called My Sister Marilyn, and it was basically she doesn't think that Marilyn committed suicide because she just spoken with her like the day before, and there were all these plans she had, and it just didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
She thinks there was foul play.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And there's, there's definitely, we will never know. We will never know because the investigation into her death and the autopsy and all of that got so bungled that it's just going to be subject to theories forever, and we'll never
yes,
quite know.
forever.
And this is, I think, one of the reasons why there are 11 TV movies about Marilyn Monroe, if you want to count, and theatrical movies and all of these things, because there are things about her life that we'll never know, and there are things about her that we'll never know. And there is something mysterious about her, and there's something in her that we can project various things on her. And I think that each generation projects new things on her and sees her in a different light. And there's something about her persona that it's able to contain all of that. And so I think we're just probably going to keep getting more Marilyn movies because we're never going to get a Marilyn movie that solves the mystery. We're never going to. I don't think it's doable.
Yeah, I think that's maybe the end goal is to get an answer.
Yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah.
but yeah, I like her a lot.
I do too. I
love her. She
I
put up with
love
some
her.
bullshit. Still does.
Yes.
Stupid.
I love her, and I love her movies, and I think that specifically her performance in Some Like It Hot, I think is one of the great film performances that has ever happened, because that movie is so wonderful, but without her, it's just madcap and silly, but she is so funny, but gives it an emotional core. And I just think every line that she delivers in that movie, I know that it was a murder to get every line out of her, that she did a million takes, but every line that she says in that movie, it sounds like she just thought of it off the top of her head.
Yeah.
Just her when she's climbing out of the bed and she goes, "Hello, honey." And it's such a radiant, spontaneous moment. I was just like, oh, that's magical. That's magic. It's that thing that Billy Wilder said about her. He said that Marilyn doesn't show up on time. She doesn't know her lines. My Aunt Edna would show up on time and she would know her lines. But who wants to watch my Aunt Edna? Marilyn has something about her that is, that she's amazing, and that, even though it was a struggle, it was worth it. So, anyway, shall we move on to our Mary Catherine Gallagher portion? Okay. So every episode, we have we wrap up with a section called the Mary Catherine Gallagher monologue, named in honor of the Saturday Night Live character Mary Catherine Gallagher, played so iconically by Molly Shannon, who is this Catholic schoolgirl who is constantly quoting TV movies and expressing her feelings in monologues from TV movies. So we wanted to do the same thing. The scene is young Norma Jean and her mother Gladys are lying in the bed that they share in Gladys's shabby Los Angeles apartment. And Gladys is smoking a cigarette. Let's see, do I have a cigarette? No.
Are you looking for a cigarette?
Here, hold on. A cigarette. Okay. She's smoking a cigarette from a long holder. All right. God, this cough. My hands, too. The chemicals in the film labs are stronger now. My eyes, my lungs. This job is killing me. Do you know what you have to do after school tomorrow?
I'm trying.
Okay.
Hold on. Okay.
All right. Do you know what you have to do after school tomorrow?
Walk to the movies.
Sit in the back, on the aisle. Don't sit too close to men.
But see, they keep sitting next to me.
You're not listening. On the way home, walk on the curb, under the streetlight. That way, you'll be seen if anybody tries to grab you. Don't tell anybody about these movie days, all right? I have to work late. There are tasks in developing that only I can do. I mustn't fail. They would fire me, and that would be the end. I'm not a bad mother. I could have put you in an orphanage, and I didn't, did I? As she speaks, Gladys's hand drops, and the end of her lit cigarette touches the bedsheets, setting them on fire. She doesn't notice.
Mommy!
Oh, damn! What's next? End scene. I was literally just doing Joan Crawford and Mommy Dear. I was doing Faye at some point.
That was so good. You were so good as the mom. You were so good as the mom. I'm so glad I got to be Christina.
Thank you. It was really,
Jesus Christ.
Christ, yes. And there's literally scenes where she's like, I have to clean you. I have to scrub. And I was like, this is Mommy Dearest.
Get in the water.
Get in the water.
Get in the water now. I have to return this dress back to MGM. Ah! Sorry.
Really?
Scary.
So, I think that concludes it. Our battle of the blondes was a draw. They both have good points. So thank you everybody for listening and watching, and remember to subscribe and to rate our podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or on YouTube, because we do a video version. If you're just listening, we do a video version of our podcast that's up on YouTube as well, and you can see Katie's amazing Marilyn recreation, her Marilyn illusion. That and then you can also follow us on Instagram or TikTok at Mother Murderer Podcaster. If you want to see clips of the movies that we cover or updates or anything like that. Did I miss anything?
No, that is all.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.